Okay, that'll work. Yeah. So we're ADOS Atlanta, and that stands for American Descendants of Slavery, and we're pushing for a Black agenda with reparations as the centerpiece. And what we have with the district attorney's race is a very important race. It's a lot going on right now in the country and in the state of Georgia and the city of Atlanta, which is in Fulton County. So we're going to start off, Paul Howard, and like I say, thanks for taking the time out and talking with us today. So how you doing?
I'm doing great, and glad to be here, and glad to get a chance to talk with you all about the campaign and how important this is to all of the citizens of Fulton County.
Yes, indeed. So Larry, would you like to get started with the first question?
Yeah, so yeah, we can go ahead, jump right in with the questions. Let me pull mine up here. All right, here's my question, Mr. Howard. We know that you, Christian Wise Smith, has endorsed you. ADOS Atlanta, we really like his platform. So we want to ask you, are you willing to adopt the diversion program mentioned in Christian's campaign? He wants to give young men job training where they get paid at least $15 an hour. So he wants to get those guys. He wants to partner with companies around Metro Atlanta, get them in, get paid $15 an hour, get trained, and then after their training period, those companies that you have partnered with, or he has partnered with, would then go on to hire them. Would that be something you're willing to adopt, Mr. Howard?
Yes. First of all, let me again tell you how happy I am to get a chance to speak with you. I have reviewed your agenda, and it's amazing that many of the very same things that you and your group are proposing are some of my ideas. Christian is endorsing me, and he's endorsing me based upon the fact that we have talked about his platform, and I've already agreed that Christian and I are going to continue to work together to make sure that many of the things that he suggested will become realities. And one of the things that we've been talking about is this kind of combination diversion program and reentry program to provide employment for young Black males so that they can stay away from the criminal justice system. So there are two components that I want to talk about. One of them that we are already involved in to a great extent, and that is record expungement, record restrictions, and sealing criminal records. Because as you know, it is very difficult to get a job when you have to show your employer a criminal record. So we've got an expungement unit in our office, but for the larger part of the crimes, we could not expunge those because under Georgia law, you could not expunge or restrict a criminal conviction. We've been working for the last 4 years to try to get a law passed that would allow folks who were convicted of misdemeanors and felonies, if they didn't have any criminal conduct within a 4-year period, then they could get the records expunged. Well, this year the state finally passed the law, but they didn't pass it as extensive as we would have liked regarding felonies. But now for misdemeanors, you can get the record expunged if it is a non-violent misdemeanor. And if it is a felony, you can apply for a pardons and parole pardon. And if you get the pardon, then you can then in turn get your felony record dismissed. And one of the things they did do in the law is they indicated that what the procedure that the Pardons and Parole Board should use. And so my office is going to be working with people that apply so that we can get the pardons, so that we can then get the record expunged. And we believe if that happens, it would actually lower the unemployment rate by at least 2% if that happens. But there's another portion of what you talked about that I believe that we need to work together to accomplish. Because in the program that Christian suggested and the program that you talked about, one of the things that we always run into is lack of funding. And this is what I mean by, if you ask one of the companies to pay someone $15 an hour, one of the first things that they raise is the money, the funds for doing that. So, one of my thought processes is that even if we had to pay part of the salary, but giving that person an opportunity to work, to learn the skill, and then to be able to later on work for that same company would be better than the system that goes on right now. So the question becomes, under this pandemic, with limited budgets on the state level and the municipal level, how do we get the funding to provide those? And I believe the way that we ought to do it is by reducing further our jail population. I believe we ought to reduce it by at least 1,000, which would save us about $30 million. And we could then use that money to create the program that Christian and the program that you talked about.
And is there something that's similar in place now that you have worked on in the past?
We have not worked on a program that involves employment minimum wage. The program that we've worked on is a juvenile program called Project Level Up, where we are trying to make sure that juveniles who've been arrested 3 times don't get arrested a fourth time. And part of our intervention process involves an aftercare program where the juveniles are picked up after school and they're taken to a social service agency to work. And part of that, what we're doing is giving those juveniles a job. And so the employment process that we talked about and that we worked on in our office involves juvenile employment so that we can keep that juvenile employed and occupied so that they won't commit the 4th incident.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it for me.
Hello?
And Larry, can we pull up that budget?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what happened?
I don't know.
I don't know. We all were still connected.
Really?
Yeah. No. They don't want us to have a conversation. So I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, man, we have gotten hacked twice, during this election season. And so I am not surprised. I'm disappointed that it keeps happening, but I'm just not surprised anymore. The lengths that people will go to really keep these conversations from happening. But I'm gonna keep trying. Yeah.
All right. Appreciate that. Appreciate you.
So,
Go ahead, Ray.
Let's take a look at the Fulton County budget. So why couldn't some of those funds be diverted from, say, for instance, under DA trial? Why general fund, is that 22 million?
Yeah.
Why couldn't some of those funds be diverted to more proactive measures to keep young brothers?
Most of that fund is I think about 92% of it, it covers funds for employees' salaries. The employee's salary and the employee's salary benefits, that is primarily, I believe it's probably going to be about 92 or 93%. And so we've had a number of studies conducted regarding the employment level in our office. And most of those studies indicate that we're probably about 120 employees short. So what you see is the salaries for where we are now, but in actuality, our office needs to be a lot larger to service the population of Fulton County, which has grown tremendously since I have been district attorney, and it's still growing. So I don't think that is the budget that I think that we ought to be looking for, and that's just my opinion. My opinion is the budget that we ought to be looking for is the budget at the Fulton County Jail. Do you have that budget before you at all?
No, I don't, but we can
Run it
pull it
front
up.
of us right now.
Numbers.
Yeah, because even if we don't have it today, I mean, I would be more than happy that maybe we could get together some other time, because I believe if you look at that budget, it is about $110 million. And that's the budget that I addressed earlier. That's the budget that I think that we should be cutting, because most of that money is being spent, on people being incarcerated. And I believe that many of those cases are cases that should have already been disposed of. There are some changes that we need to make in our court system that forces the judges to get the cases over within a short amount of time. And then we're talking about a $30 million savings as compared with the 22 million, which encompasses about 93% of the DA's total budget, I believe.
Yeah, I definitely think that that 100 million needs to be lower.
Yeah.
So regardless of where that money comes from, more money needs to be spent on the other side of the judicial system before our youth even get to that point.
Yeah.
So you mentioned level up. Why does someone have to get in trouble 3 times before there's intervention by Fulton County?
So this is what we tried to do, is to look at what the data indicates. And so we spent a lot of time looking at the juvenile recidivism rate in our county, which is about 58%. That's really kind of terrible, because the adult recidivism rate is about 34% across the state, but for juveniles in Fulton County, it's 58%. So we looked at the juveniles who ended up in the criminal justice system and in the adult system. And what the data shows is, of those young people, 88% of them had been arrested 3 times or more. So what we're theorizing, that if you can keep the juvenile from being arrested the 4th time, then there's an opportunity to keep that juvenile out of the adult system by turning that juvenile into some other positive form. So there is another group of people who only get arrested in juvenile court 1 or 2 times, and it looks like the juvenile court does a pretty good job with them. But the problem area comes into play when the juvenile has been arrested 3 times. So that's why we were focusing on the 3 as opposed to the children who are arrested fewer times than 3 times.
I get that, but when I look at the budget, and who decides what money is allocated where when it comes to the budget that we're looking at right here?
It's a dual process. Mainly the county manager's office makes recommendations to the county commissioners, and the county commissioners have the final say on what is included in the budget process.
So in your opinion, if more money was spent to prevention and being proactive when it comes to our youth, wouldn't you say the amount used for district attorneys and trials will go down and less of that would even be necessary?
I believe that would happen, and it would happen eventually, because if you look at what my office has done, when we started in '97, that was our whole aim, is to reduce the crime, prevent the crime before people got to the Superior Court. And so we put together a number of criminal justice prevention programs, and we arranged our office so that we would focus upon prevention. And as a result, the violent crime rate in Atlanta has dropped by 70%. The overall crime rate has dropped by 62%. So I believe that when you're making an analysis of crime prevention, that there are two things that you got to look at. One is the crime rate itself. The other one is whether or not your population is increasing. Because as you know, people do not want to move to a place that they feel is unsafe. Well, since I've been in office, the population in the city of Atlanta has actually increased by 26%, and the population in our county has increased by 47%. So I agree with you that in the long run, one of the ways to balance or reduce the criminal justice budget is to create more programs on the front end to prevent crimes so that people won't get to the courts in the first place.
Would you advocate for that?
I would advocate for it, but let me say this. I also strongly agree with the other premise of your organization, which is the thing that I think most people miss. And you guys have not missed this fact. When people start talking about crime prevention, they somehow skip the economic problems that are going on in our community. And that's why I was so impressed by reading what you submitted, because this is something that we keep reminding people that, in a sense, the courthouse and the criminal justice system really kind of being at the end of the process. But what it seems like people don't want to do is to face the beginning of the process.
I have a question. So I like that you're working with Christian Y. Smith. Like, that is a major factor for me. Like, I have my ballot sitting right here. So these questions that you're answering are helping to form my decision. I know I'm either vote you or down ballot. That's how it's gonna go. So you mentioned before that you wanted to meet monthly with community advocates and organizers. And I want to know if that's still a goal of yours and how we can be involved in that.
Well, I definitely hope that you would be involved in it. And as I said, is reading over your policy recommendations, I have to say that they are a lot better constructed than some of the other things that I've read. Also, what I've asked the other organizations is you got to come up with something in writing, and you've got to make demands. And I noticed that's the word that you all used, because we've been for a long time asking people to make changes, and you can see that they've made very little changes. In fact, my thought is, and I've said this repeatedly, I think that we should make demands to Joe Biden. I don't just think we ought to just wave Joe Biden in. When he gets to the White House on January the 21st, I believe the first day that he's there, he should do some things that bring about some institutional change. Yes, so let me tell you what my plan is particularly with this whole issue of police brutality. As I've explained to some of the many of the community groups and community leaders, we've been having a difficult time in the DA's office getting the cooperation of the police department. For instance, in the normal kind of crimes that are we see in the city of Atlanta, for instance, if it's a rape charge, the police department will deliver to me the file. But if it's a case involving a police officer, then I have to try to get the file from them, which means I have to file open records requests. I know that seems kind of strange. I have to file subpoenas. just to get basic kinds of evidence about some of the cases that we investigate. So what I plan to do is to set up a monthly meeting, and at that monthly meeting, we would look over the list of cases, and then we would take 2 of those cases and we would actually examine the case. But we would examine the case to see, first of all, are there some local changes that we can make that will speed up the process? And what I mean by that is, for instance, if I said to the group, if they said, well, why hadn't you gotten the evidence in this case? And I said, you know, I'm still trying to get it from the Atlanta Police Department. Well, then I would expect that shortly after that, we would have a meeting with the mayor and the police department to say, why can't we change this rule? It would be very helpful to the DA's office if that kind of thing took place. But not only would we look at local changes that might be helped, we can look at state changes, and we can also look at national changes. And I noticed that many of the demands that you all have listed are national demands that we need to make sure they are passed. So that's one of the things that we definitely want to do, not only to increase communication, but to actually start solving some of the problems of police reform.
And you said, okay, so you said look over the list of cases, take 2 cases, then see if they can make local changes to speed up the process. And did you say that there was something else?
Yeah, as I said, so we would make a list of all of the pending cases, so everybody could look at them, we could see where they are, and so that means that when you came back the next time, you could say, wait a minute, you know, this was case number 18 last time, and now it's case number 19. So we would all keep an inventory to see where we are, and we would be talking about what are some of the problems you are encountering, and I believe would be a great assistance to the city. For instance, I have to sit down on many occasions with family members when their children, generally Black men, have been shot, and I have to report information like this. They'll ask me about the body cam, and I have to say to them, well, the police tell me that the body cam was not turned on. Do you know what the citizens think when I say that?
Yeah, they're probably cussing. What do they say?
Well, they thinking I'm a crook,
yeah,
for just relating that to them. But so what I hope to happen by these meetings is that when the meeting is over with, then of course we would arrange a meeting with the city to say, hey, you know, we sat down with the DA's office, we looked at this one case, and in this one case, the policeman said that he didn't turn the body cam on. What did you guys do at the police? The police, is he still working there? How does this keep happening? How is it that he keeps ending up, the DA, with a file when there's no body cam, there's no dash cam, and when the understanding was since 2016, the city of Atlanta police officers were supposed to be wearing body cams. Give you another example with Rayshard Brooks. 2 of those, you know, both of those officers were wearing body cams. And do you know what supposedly happened with the body cam?
they broke.
They said they fell off.
Oh,
Wow.
They didn't fall off while they were wrestling, but guess when they fell off?
when they shot him, I'm assuming.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And see, that's the kind of thing that I think we need to sit and talk with the city about, because they need to understand that, hey, we are not very comfortable with that explanation. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to see it change. So that's why I believe this whole concept of defunding the police is so important. Because suppose we said this: if the police department went a whole year without the body cam falling off, you'd get a 1% raise. What do you think the police would do?
Keep it on.
They'd probably keep it on.
Yeah, they keep it on.
So that is why I believe that this could really be helpful. Not only could it be really helpful, we could set the tone for the whole country by engaging in these meetings, and we could show other people how we could improve our system just by having this discussion. Believe it or not, you know, after Rayshard Brooks, the mayor set up a study committee. They are studying policing. Do you think they included the DA's office?
No.
No, they did not.
Why not?
Yeah, they did not.
Yeah, well, I would love for us to be a part of that. Like, that's right up our alley, Bulldog Alley. Yes.
Well, I can tell by reading your work that you would be a really important part of what we do. And so that's what our plan is. And that's why I need your help. I don't just need you to vote for me. I need you to go out and get 20 or 30 other folks, because this is a big deal when we've got a DA who is meeting with the police union and who has made a commitment to them. And, you know, people can say, well, Mr. Howard, you don't have any real proof that they've decided not to prosecute cases. There's no other reason for the police union to endorse you. That's the only reason they endorse DAs, is to make sure that policemen are not prosecuted. And I believe that that's something that would be very harmful to our community. You know, when I started as DA, it wasn't unusual that 15 or 20 Black men would get killed every year by the police. And I don't want to go back to that time. And I'm sure you all don't want to go back either. And this is one of the ways we can make sure that that doesn't happen.
Did you get the email demands for a just city? ADOS demands for a just city?
Yes, I did. I got it.
The very first one under protect the safety of ADOS residents of Atlanta is to penalize officers whose body cameras are turned off for any reason, including but not limited to automatic termination and possible criminal charges for tampering with evidence.
Right.
And invest in body cameras that cannot be manually turned off by the officers, because some municipalities have that capability with their body cams that you can't turn them off.
Absolutely. Like Georgia Tech.
Go ahead.
It's like Georgia Tech. I visited their campus and they use that technology you can't turn the body cam off. But guess who is the organization in the city of Atlanta that keeps trying to prevent them from using the body cams? It's the police union.
Well, like they tell us, if you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't have a problem with these cameras, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The cameras ought to make it better for officers because they don't have to explain so much about their conduct. You can see it yourself. You can see it on the film. But it is the police union that is constantly complaining and trying to keep the officers from using body cams. And the city of Atlanta needs to do a better job. And I think by having this coalition between groups like yourself and the DA's office, I think we can really make some big progress if we did it.
I agree.
You mentioned before incentives for police to not turn off their body cams.
Right.
But what about a deterrent for them to cause police brutality on the citizens? What do you say about penalizing them by way of their pensions?
Right. Well, now this is what my thought is. I think that we might be able to make some progress here if we look at some other things that are important to us that we could use the budget process for. For instance, you guys mentioned policemen living in the community. Suppose the salaries, the budget was conditioned upon a certain percentage of those officers having to live in our community. And I think you all said something about introducing them to the community, but I think it ought to go further than that. I think they ought to live in the community. And suppose we condition the budgets that would require them to live in the city. See, I believe that by pointing out some positive things they could do, suppose the budget rewarded them for de-escalating confrontations between the police and citizens. Suppose the budget said, if you established a unit that would be comprised of social workers and people who are skilled in confrontations as humanists rather than warriors, if you put that unit together in your police department, then you would be compensated. I think the main condition that we should put in the police budget is you can't kill people. You can't kill citizens, Black people, unarmed Black people. And if you do that, everybody gets penalized. But if you don't kill anybody, then people should get rewarded. I think if we look first of all at those things, then maybe we don't have to get to the part about taking the pensions, because I think that maybe what will happen is maybe the policemen will start policing themselves a lot better because they don't want to lose money. Maybe they would like to get a little raise, and they'll say to their partners, you know, guys, maybe if you'll just stop, we can all get a raise at the end of the year. So that's my thought.
So
But honestly,
I'm sorry, aside from the raise, if they do something correct, but as far as a deterrent is concerned, aside from pensions, how can you deter them from doing it, aside from going at them?
Well, this is his answer, is to give them positive consequences or
Right.
whatever. So my thing is, how do you measure that so that we know, well, this isn't working, let's snatch these pensions?
Yeah, right. Well, so that's why my thought was that you got to give them something that is measurable. And let's suppose they didn't do it over a certain amount of time. That's when I think you need to then go to the more punitive aspects. But I think if you listen to the police rhetoric, and that's a lot of it's just rhetoric, they're accusing the citizens of attacking them. You know, they say the police are under attack, and I always say, wow, I thought that was Rayshard Brooks that was on the pavement. That didn't seem like a police officer. It seemed like it's the other way around. But what they expect is that you would attack them. So that's why I'm thinking that maybe by starting with some positive reinforcements, we might be able to get better results. Now, that's just my thought.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, because like that's their job. Their job is supposed to be to serve and protect. We understand they're serving capitalists and protecting capital. So, but in essence, we're saying, no, you work for us, you serve and protect us.
Right.
So that's their job. So to us, to me, it sounds like you're rewarding them for doing their job. Like that's my child saying that, like, okay, I'm gonna pay you $20 a week to do some chores, and they're like, well, I want to make my bed and whatever. No, that's what you're supposed to do. You ain't getting paid to make your bed. Like, so I don't know. I hear you, but I would say if you're going to do that, like you said, put a time frame on it and something measurable in a short time frame, because we ain't got time for them to keep killing us while we figure this out. So,
well, yeah. I believe you're absolutely right, and that's why we have to say, if it appears that they're ignoring what we're trying to do, then you can move to the more punitive aspects. But we haven't tried this method. We haven't tried the method of giving them some reward or recognition or some bonus for doing what they should have done anyway. But in the regular form of life, that's what we do. Isn't that what you ask your employee to do? Is to reward you when you've done a good job. I mean, isn't that what people do? The more you work and the better you work, you're kind of thinking the more you should be rewarded. So maybe we might get the police to do that. As I said, because we haven't tried it, let's work together, let's try it, And if it doesn't work, then you can always start then to talk about something more punitive. But I do agree that there is no excuse not to keep your body cam on. It's no excuse at all. No, none at all. And I think the police have been far too lenient in letting people get away with not wearing body cams. And it ought to stop immediately.
Are you familiar with House Bill 838?
Yes, I am.
Because you mentioned something about them saying that citizens would be trying to harm police.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that House bill and give us a little info on it? And what are your thoughts on House Bill 838?
Well, let me tell you something. Do you know one of the reasons that they want to get rid of Paul Howard?
No. Speak
Is
on
House Bill 838. Because the thing that you've talked about, the charge called intimidation of a police officer. So if a police officer is arresting you and you happen to say something bad about him, like you're ugly, you're overweight, the police officer could actually charge you with a felony. And that's the intimidation of the police part. And what the police have figured out is, do you think Paul Howard is going to prosecute some citizen for doing that? No. It's a terrible bill. It's one of the things that happened just 2 weeks ago. I believe Portia Williams from the former Atlanta housewife went up to Louisville, Kentucky. That same law is in effect in Louisville, Kentucky. While they were protesting, the police accused them of using some defamatory language against them, and they charged them with that crime. It's a terrible crime. The other thing that it does is, as you know, that bill gives the police the right to sue citizens who file complaints against the police officers. So the police officer can actually sue you for filing a complaint. Well, why is that troublesome? It's troublesome because the union has a whole cadre of lawyers, and that's what they're going to be doing. It is a chilling effect that we've never seen in this state. So if you make a complaint against a police officer, then you can expect them to start suing you in court. It's terrible. The other thing that it does, there's some question as to whether or not the Citizen Review Board is going to exist once the law passes. And I think the day is the last day. The governor has it sitting on his desk, and if the governor doesn't sign it, that means it goes into operation automatically. But in the bill, it talks about who can interview a police officer. And it sort of suggests that the only persons who could interview a police officer is another police investigator, which might, in a sense, eliminate the Citizens Review Bill. One of the things that we have got to do in the upcoming gubernatorial election, we've got to change the composition of the House and the Senate. We've got to get a Democratic governor so that we can override some of the crazy bill that the Republicans have passed, like 838, was passed almost exclusively by Republicans. And it's the bill that was created by police unions for the protection of police officers.
And it was passed on what day? Was that Rayshard Brooks's funeral?
It was while I was sitting at the funeral, and I don't know whether or not you were there or not, but I thought that made it a double disgrace.
Oh, disrespectful.
Yeah, not only that it was passed, but it was passed while Rayshard Brooks's funeral took place at Ebenezer Baptist Church. It's disgraceful, truly disgraceful.
Now, speaking of Rayshard Brooks, there are people who say that you're just doing this for political theater. You've been, if I'm not mistaken, you've had death threats put against you. We know that GBI is launching an investigation of how you're investigating an investigation or whatever that is they're trying to do. Right. So will you stay on the case after you're elected? Who's to say you won't drop this thing and say, hey, I'm in here now, I don't know y'all. I'm finna
Well,
switch
listen,
it up. How do we know Paul Howard ain't gonna switch it up once he's elected?
well, listen, I think that's a good question. And I just ask people to look at my record. I prosecuted the first case against an Atlanta police officer in 2002. It involved Corey Ward, who was a 19-year-old black male who was driving an SUV. The city of Atlanta officer thought the vehicle was stolen. As it turns out, the SUV belonged to his mother. We investigated the case. The union didn't like the fact we were investigating it because about 2 years into the investigation, we were able to get the officer's partner to testify that Corey Ward did not strike him with the SUV, that the officer just shot him. The case was indicted. And when it was presented to our Superior Court, one of our Superior Court judges gave him immunity. And I noticed in your demands, that's one of the things that you talk about getting rid of. We ought to get rid of the qualified and sovereign immunity as it relates to police officers. That was the first case that we prosecuted. And unfortunately, when we did that case, it was one of the first times in the history of our state that a white police officer was held accountable for injury or death to a black citizen. The next case that we handled was the case involving Katherine Johnston. And you guys probably remember Miss Johnston, who was 92 years old. She was seated in the bed in her own house when the Atlanta police came in and shot her. They initially lied about why they came in. Because of the investigation that we undertook, we found out that what they said was not true. Those officers ended up taking a plea for the death of Katherine Johnston. And that was the first time an officer, white officers again, were held responsible for the death of a black citizen. And so since that time, we've handled about 38 other cases involving police misconduct. In fact, with Rayshard Brooks, it was a case that we asked that an arrest warrant be issued prior to indictment. That would mark the fourth time that we've done it. We did it in 2016 with a murder case involving an Atlanta officer who shot a 22-year-old black man in the back of the head. We asked that he be arrested prior to indictment. We did another case in 2018 involving an officer by the name of Richard Gadine, who was an East Point officer who raped or sexually assaulted 4 women, all black women. And we found out about it some year or so after he had assaulted the last woman. But as soon as we found out about it, we immediately moved to have him arrested. You know about the 2 students from the Atlanta University Center. And then the 4th case would be this case involving Rayshard Brooks. So that has been what I have done. That is my commitment to the community. If you don't think that I would prosecute them, go and ask the police union, because they are real sure that I'm going to prosecute them. That's why they're trying so hard to get rid of me. So they want to make sure that the case is not prosecuted.
I seen you speaking, say before somewhere, a couple places, that you have visions of Atlanta become the Black Mayberry. So
Right.
How do we get there? How do we turn Atlanta to the Black Mayberry?
Well, when people ask me about—
Mr. Howard, before you answer that, just could you give just a quick explanation of what you mean by the Black Mayberry?
Right. Well, I guess that might have been before you guys' time, the show Mayberry, because in Mayberry, the point that I was trying to make is that the crime in this mythical city in North Carolina called Mayberry, which Sheriff Andy Griffin, the crime rate was so low, they only had the 1 sheriff, and the sheriff only had 1 deputy. But the crime rate was so low that the deputy carried an empty gun, and the deputy had 1 bullet. And if you recall, he would put the bullet in his shirt pocket. So what I say to people is, people tend to think that crime is just inevitable in an urban community. I don't believe it's just inevitable. There's some other things going on. And so we ought to strive to get rid of all of the crime. So once I mentioned Mayberry, I said, well, let's look at something that might be sort of in the middle. And it's interesting that the same city that Christian Smith is talking about with the LEADS program is the same city that my office examined, and that is Seattle, Washington, Kings County, Washington. And this is what we found. The population in Kings County, in the county itself, I believe is about 1.5 million more than what is in Fulton County. In Seattle proper, the population is about 200,000 more than the population in the city of Atlanta. But in 2016, we had 116 homicides in the city of Atlanta, but they only had 26 homicides in Seattle. So we tried to look at Seattle to see, well, what's the big difference between what's going on in Seattle and what's going on in the city of Atlanta? And your conclusion was the same conclusion that we reached. And that is, we looked at the take-home pay of the citizens in that community, because in Kings County, the average take-home pay was about $74,000 a year. In the city of Atlanta at that time, it was only about $23,000. I believe it is that gap that produces the crime issues that we see. And that if we want to reduce crime substantially in our communities, we've got to close that gap so that we can then get to the point that Seattle and Kings County, and then we can get beyond that, and maybe we can dream to become Mayberry. So that's what I mean by that.
That's why we have the demands for.
Real quick, Ray. In Seattle, I believe a factor, I was looking at the data here, they have a lot less Black people than Atlanta, less than 10%. And they have 65% white and 14% Asian, only 7% Black.
Right.
Do you believe that plays a factor?
No. And people always say to me, it's the demographics. See, I don't think there's anything genetically that makes Black people genetically inclined to commit crimes. That it is the economic system that is in place in the community that causes the crime.
Yeah.
I don't believe it has a direct proportion that the more Black people you got, the more crime you're gonna have.
No, what I mean is that would that have an effect in the city willing to allocate more budget and allocate and start programs like the LEAD program to basically be more progressive in the space to close like the income gap. That's what I mean. Yes,
you're absolutely right. Because of the systematic racism in our country, that people, the efforts to seize the economic power that is already in some communities, there is going to be more resistance when the people that are reaching for it are Black people. So for that reason, based upon that, I would say, yes, that is important. But I do not believe it has anything inherent to do with the persons. It has a lot more to do with the economic viability of the communities.
So I have some breaking news. The prosecutors have just asked the judge in Officer Garrett Roth's case, the officer that shot Rayshard Brooks, asked the judge to revoke his bond. He went on vacation in Florida without permission. So.
But you guess who the prosecutor was?
Who?
You're looking at it.
Oh, okay, that was you. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Rayshard Brooks, so okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, dude. Why? How did he get bail in the first place? He's obviously a menace to society. But okay,
Well, as you know, Well, I objected to the bond. We asked that no bail be set. That's usually what happens in a murder case. And when, you shoot somebody in the back twice and kick them, that's a murder case to me. The judge granted a bond, $500,000 bond. And I believe it was on yesterday that we found out that Garrett Rolfe was in Daytona Beach, sunning on the beach and on vacation. And we immediately filed a motion to revoke his bond. And we understand from the judge of the day that she is going to set a date for a hearing. We asked the judge to arrest him immediately and bring him back to Atlanta. And once we brought him back, then the judge ought to set a hearing date. The judge has not done that yet. The judge is apparently going to set a date for a hearing. Me personally, I think it is disgraceful that that guy who has murdered someone in our community is now down in Daytona Beach. He should be in jail, and I hope that it's corrected by the judge.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. What do you think about DAs overcharging police as a strategy to help police avoid charges? Does that happen?
Overcharging the police to help them do what?
To help them avoid charges, to help them not be arrested, overcharging them so that the jury can't charge them, basically.
Okay, so I guess what they would say is if you charge them with murder, then the jurors wouldn't want to convict them of murder. So if you charge them with the right thing, you're actually helping the policeman.
It's just a
I
question.
guess. Well, so let me just say this. As somebody who has been doing this, we've actually convicted a number of policemen of murder and felony murder. I believe that the people of Fulton County, if you present an appropriate case, I believe they're going to return an appropriate verdict. So if they're suggesting that that's why we did it, that's not why we did it. You certainly can't make that suggestion with many other prosecutors in this country, because if you check around, there are not a lot of prosecutors who are even prosecuting police officers. So no, that's not why we did it to help the policemen. We did it because I believe that's what happened.
Gotcha.
Right.
So, Shamika?
So yes, Mr. Howard, as you know, we are an advocacy group, advocacy organization. And obviously the district attorney office cannot write policies that would grant reparations. However, we would always like to hear all elected officials stance on reparations. And my question is also, would you also support reparation advocacy personally?
Well, let me tell you, you live and learn in the world that we live in today. And let me tell you, I have sort of changed my view because of the pandemic. Because you remember before the pandemic, if Black people talked about reparations, immediately the outcry was, we didn't have any money to give you guys reparation. But I noticed during the pandemic, we were printing up money left and right to pass out to people. And we just in a couple of weeks, we put together a Marshall-like plan to provide incomes. And I started asking myself, well, why couldn't we do that same thing for some of our Black communities? So my view is a little more refined. I think that we ought to apply some of the same principles, because if you look at what has happened during the pandemic, some of those same things have been happening in our community before the pandemic. In fact, it looks like we've been living in a pandemic for a long time. So if we can do it for the pandemic, why can't we do it for the regular life of Black people? So I believe that if you look at our economic status in this country, it is obvious that there needs to be a change. Whether it's reparations or some other name, I think that there needs to be a process where there's some equalization of economies between all communities. And that's just not existence. And one of the things that's clear is even right now, when you're talking about the pandemic, most of the largest percentage of the victims are African-American. And people see that it's because of the economic conditions that Black people live. And so I have to say, if I had to vote or give an opinion today, I think we ought to adopt the same principles.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, the only vaccine there is reparations for American descendants of slavery. Our wealth disparities stem from slavery all the way to Jim Crow. Reconstruction was destroyed. All of those things that extracted the wealth from our communities is hence the reason that we see so many poverty crimes, which basically is what you're seeing and is impacting a lot of you all's workload. So definitely has to be reparations, pre-reparations surrounded by a Black agenda for American descendants of slavery.
Mr. Howard, that's basically all we have. They said that you had an hour, right? So we don't want to prolong you.
Right.
But we do want to thank you for your time and obliging us and answering our questions.
Well, listen, I really want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. I hope that you'll vote in the election. I would ask you to consider voting now. Don't even wait until August 11th. They will pull a lot of tricks. I noticed yesterday they've already pulled one trick. They started announcing that my opponent is already miles ahead in the election.
I saw that.
Yeah, that's what the AJC did. And you know, I was telling my staff, you know, they when I ran for DA, and I think in my second term, even on election night, they were announcing that my opponent had won the election. And you know, the AJC was one of the newspapers that announced that Hillary Clinton would win by a big margin. So you can't be dissuaded by what I see as Republican tricks. And they're tricks designed to keep people from coming to the polls. So I would like to encourage you all to go and vote now, but also to ask your friends to go out and vote, because it sickens me when these people are sitting around planning for you and I not to go and vote. They're actually saying, well, they're going to go and vote anyway. And that's sickening to me. And I think just as we did with President Obama, I want to fool them. I want to show them that we will come out and vote, and it gives them a new respect for us as citizens of this country and citizens of this county. So I thank you all very much, and hopefully we're going to get a chance to work together. And I think if we can work together, I can really see some valuable things that we can accomplish for our community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely gonna know you do that.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right, man. See you later.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Y'all have a good one.
Good job, guys. Take
Thanks.
care.
This is ADOS Atlanta, and thank y'all a lot. See y'all soon.
All right. Later, y'all.
Later.
Like,